Little and Broken, but So Good, by Wicked Writer on AU3. Episode 8, Chapter 8. All week, Shouta had been looking forward to seeing Hizashi. Of course, he was excited to be able to spend time with his daughter at the zoo, but part of him was more excited to be able to include Hizashi in as well. Although he knew they shouldn't be spending time together, with Eri being the one to invite him, it felt like they found a loophole to still keep things professional while also seeing each other outside of the school. They still talked to each other during drop off and pick off, although it had been a rather busy week, so conversation was brief. Having Asashi to himself all day on Saturday sounded like a dream come true. So Shouta focused on work and tried not to think about how slowly the week was going by. When Friday night rolled around, Shouta was relaxing with Eri on the couch watching a movie. He didn't allow her too much screen time, since she was still rather young, but would always happily join her in anything she did want to watch. Eri was curled up against his side, engrossed in the cartoon that was playing. Shouta was more or less falling asleep, so the plot of the movie was completely beyond him. There was a sharp knock at the door, which startled Shouta awake. Looking at his watch, he was confused to see it was almost 9, which was far too late for anyone he didn't know to come over. His phone was still sitting on the coffee table, but there weren't any missed calls or text. Pausing the movie, Shouta got up and made his way to the door. When he opened it, he was greeted with a mess of purple hair and the teen, who looked like he hadn't gotten sleep in a couple of weeks. "Hi, Mr. Aizawa. Sorry I didn't call." He tried to give Shouta a smile, but it looked a little strained, like he was trying not to show his real emotions. "Hitoshi, what are you doing here?" Indecisively, he opened the door further and ushered the young kid inside. "Got into a fight with my dad. I was hoping you would let me crash for a couple days." Shouta sighed. Hitoshi Shouta was a foster kid that Shouta had a soft spot for. Maybe it was how he carried himself despite the harsh conditions he was forced to endure at home, or the fact that he loved cats just as much as Shouta did, or the fact that he never stayed defeated no matter what life threw at him. Shouta could see himself in this kid for the first time since he was dropped off at his house with a garbage bag of clothes and a scrawl of every time he got near. Over the years, Hitoshi would show up, normally dropped off by a social worker, and would stay a few days while his dad worked through whatever issues he was having. Eventually, he would have to return back home, and Shouta would worry about him for months on end until he came back again. This was a long stretch since the last visit. Part of him was glad to see the young boy unharmed and here, but the other part was worried about what he had to endure over the past year. "You're always welcome here, Hitoshi. You know that." "Thanks." He took off his backpack and was about to offer it to Shouta before he froze. Shouta could see Eri watching curiously from the couch. Hitoshi was staring back at her in surprise. This was the first time that Hitoshi would be here when there was another kid. "Oh, you already have someone here. I should go." "Don't be an idiot. You're not going anywhere." Shouta grabbed his bag and walked it down the hall to the room he kept for when he housed foster kids. Although it was pretty much Hitoshi's room at this point, when he came back out, neither of the kids had moved. "Have you eaten?" Hitoshi shook his head. Shouta immediately went into the kitchen and pulled out the leftovers from dinner. It wasn't much, just some miso salmon and rice. But after he heated up and plated it on the table, Hitoshi dug in like it was the best thing in the world. "Who's she?" Hitoshi asked in a lowered voice between bites of food. "That's my daughter, Eri." Shouta took the seat next to Hitoshi. "Do you want to come say hi?" Eri shook her head from the couch. "Daughter? When did that happen?" Hitoshi looked shocked. Shouta gave a very brief synopsis of Eri's adoption. It didn't feel right to go into too much detail, even if Eri lost interest and continued watching the movie. In turn, Hitoshi explained this latest fight with his father. Apparently, this was the first time that the young boy stood up for himself, and Naoko was not happy with it. There was barely enough time for him to finish packing his bag before the yelling started. Thankfully, He managed to get out of the house before anything turned physical. Shouta made a mental note to teach Hitoshi some basic self-defense moves before he left, just as a precaution. It had been a couple of years since Shouta stopped going to his martial art classes, but he had gotten fairly good. Life just kinda got busy, and the 3 days a week turned into one, which turned into none. He should really get back into it. What caused the fight, if you don't mind me asking? Shouta cleared the plate once Hitoshi was done. I've been busy studying for an exam into the advanced courses at my school. My dad didn't like that I was out late at the library. He said I probably wouldn't get in, so it was just a waste of time. Immediately, Shouta had to take a couple of breaths to steady his rage. He could feel his gut twist in anger, and he had to stop himself from wanting to storm out to yell at Akio. Sure, he was always the type to be dismissive of Hitoshi, but never had he stood so low as is to insult him. No one worked as hard as Hitoshi did, and he was just as good as anyone else in that course. Obviously, he would get in, and Shouta would be there to cheer him on when he did. I took the test, but I'm still waiting on the results. Hitoshi finished the rest of his plate and got to place it into the sink. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. Shouta meant it. The results of the test didn't matter. Obviously, if he got into the course, that would be amazing for him. But even if he didn't, Shouta was still proud that he tried. It was eerily quiet in the apartment before Shouta realized something was wrong. He looked back into the kitchen to see Hitoshi standing over the sink, head bowed and a mess of purple hair blocking his face. Shouta stood up and walked over to him. Hitoshi, is everything all right? He approached cautiously, worried that he would startle like a wounded animal. When he finally looked back up, Shouta could see the tears welling up in his eyes. What did I do wrong? Hitoshi sounded so small. It took Shouta back to when he first met the young boy, barely over 8 at the time, who looked like he could fall apart if Shouta raised his voice even the tiniest amount. None of this is your fault. He could feel his heart breaking in his chest. How could someone do this to a child? Who would dare make someone as wonderful as Hitoshi feel like he wasn't good enough? Not for the first time. Shouta had the urge to go knock some sense into Akio. Without thinking further, Shouta wrapped him up into a hug and just allowed him to cry. As a general rule, Shouta didn't do physical contact. Growing up, bouncing from one foster home to another, he never had someone who would show him physical affection. As an adult, when people expected physical contact, even as simple as hand-holding, Shouta always felt awkward about it. He vowed that when he became a foster parent, that he wouldn't let the kids in his care feel the same way. He always made sure Eri would get as many hugs as she requested, or even cuddled together on the couch, so naturally, Hitoshi shouldn't be exempt. He clung on to Shouta, silently crying into his shoulders. Thought he still had no idea what to do when someone was crying. All he could do was be there for Hitoshi, and hope that's what he needed. The moment was interrupted when Shouta could see Eri approaching, holding a stuffed animal. It was a cat plushie that she had dressed in a red cape and mask. She pulled on Hitoshi's shirt hem to get his attention. This is Lemillion. Mio gave him to me. He cheers me up when I'm sad. Shoved the stuffed animal towards Hitoshi. He can cheer you up too. Wordlessly, Hitoshi pulled the animal towards his chest and gave a small smile. Tear stains streaked his cheeks, but for the first time tonight, Shouta could see genuine happiness in his bloodshot eyes. He led them to the couch, and Eri took that as an opportunity to tell Hitoshi all about Mirio, who she declared was her best friend, as long as he didn't tell Mai in her class. Well, Hitoshi didn't say much, which reminded Shouta of himself. He was a great listener to all of Eri's stories. Apparently, she must have decided that Hitoshi was trustworthy, since she didn't stop talking his ear off. The entire time, Hitoshi hugged the stuffed animal to his chest. It was sweet to just see them getting along so well. And tomorrow, we're going to the zoo, Eri practically shouted. The thought snapped Shouta back into reality. In all the commotion of the evening, he had forgotten about the plans of the zoo. Hitoshi probably wouldn't want to go anywhere after everything that happened, but he didn't have a way to get a hold of Hisashi and let him know that what was going on. He could probably send a text to Emmy to try to get a message to him, but it was late and there was no guarantee she would see it in time. We don't have to. I'm sure you want to get your rest, Hitoshi. But we were supposed to see Mr. Yamada. Eri sounded so heartbroken. It's okay. You two can go. Hitoshi tried to give a smile, but it looked forced. Toshi, you're coming too. Even though Eri said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, Hitoshi looked so touched at the words. That forced smile turned into something real. Shouta didn't think that Hisashi would mind adding one more to the trip to the zoo. Naturally, Eri was the first one to wake the next morning. After she went to bed, Shouta and Hitoshi stayed up a bit longer and talked. He was relieved to see that, though emotionally wounded, he was physically unharmed. Apparently Nokia had quite a bit of a drink before the argument broke out. Shouta knew that he was irritable when he drank. That also meant that he was in violation of his patrol. Shouta would have to contact Shiojo, Hitoshi's caseworker, with that information later. Perhaps he could make an argument to have him stay with Shouta for a bit longer. By the time they actually went to bed, it was past midnight, and Eri's internal alarm clock meant that she was jumping on Shota's bed as soon as the sun was up. She was so excited about the trip, explaining she wanted to see all the animals including the unicorns. No matter how many times Shouta explained they didn't have any, she was determined they would see some anyways. Hitoshi crawled out from the guest room. Not too much later, hearing the two of them talk must have been enough to wake him. He immediately dashed for his coffee while Shouta made breakfast for them. It felt like such a wonderful domestic scene, something that Shouta could get used to. Although, there was one more addition that Shouta wouldn't mind adding to the picture. But that was something to think about long into the future. Not right now. Not when he and Hisashi hadn't even had a proper date. Thinking about that, Shouta debated telling Hitoshi about the potential relationship with Hisashi, since they were going to spend the day with him at the zoo. But in the end, he decided not to. There was no saying how this would go, and Shouta didn't want to tell people just to have it crumble in his face. No, he would wait until there was something to tell people before he opened his mouth about it. Once breakfast was had, he focused on corralling Eri into getting dressed. Apparently, she wasn't too happy that she wouldn't wear her pajamas. Having to brush her hair was a whole nother story. But eventually, he managed to get her ready. Wanting to be comfy, Shouta just threw on a pair of jeans and black shirts, finishing it off with his favorite gray scarf that Eri found when she was shopping a few months ago. The three of them took the train to the zoo. Eri talked the entire trip as Shouta listened, providing minimal contribution, but she was used to that already. Hitoshi seemed to be in his own world. He sat staring at the window, but his eyes looked like they were a million miles away. Shouta wanted to ask him about it, to see what was wrong, but he knew that eventually the team would open up. Trying to pry information out of him before he was ready to share would only damage the relationship they had developed throughout the years. Hitoshi would tell him in time. The moment they arrived, Eri was dragging Shouta by the hand, apparently unsatisfied with how slow he was moving. Hitoshi trailed not too far behind. "Mr. Yamada!" Eri screeched. "You came!" "Of course I would. You invited me." Hisashi smiled as they came close. Shouta couldn't help but notice how good he looked. It was a simple outfit, really, just jeans and a leather jacket. But everything seemed to be designed to pull Shota's attention in. The jeans were on the skinny side, but not so tight that it would be inappropriate for a day out. And the leather jacket looked worn and comfortable, but when zipped, seemed to emphasize his narrow waist. Shouta also noted the eyeliner he wore, which made his green eyes stand out even more so. He looked good enough that Shouta had to resist the urge to kiss him. "Hello." He greeted, and he could see the way Hisashi's eyes trailed him. Shouta didn't feel like he put enough effort into his appearance to warrant Hisashi's attention, but nonetheless, it was given to him anyways. "Hi." Hisashi gave such a small smile that, for a moment, Shouta forgot everyone else was around. That was until a throat was cleared to his right side. He blinked back to reality to see Hitoshi standing next to him with a raised eyebrow. Sorry, this is Hitoshi. He gestured at the boy standing next to him. Hitoshi, this is Hizashi Yamada, Eri's teacher. They shook hands briefly, exchanging greetings to be polite, before Shouta sighed, getting the tickets. There was a brief conversation in which Hizashi wanted to pay for his own, but Shouta wouldn't allow him, stating he was a guest and it was Shota's treat. Hitoshi gave him a suspicious glance, but didn't say anything. Maybe Shouta really should have talked to him before. He always forgot how smart the kid was. Once aside, Eri made a beeline straight for the big cat exhibit, which was just off the right of the entrance. Shouta was surprised that she latched onto Hitoshi's hand and pulled him in the direction. He hoped this meant that she would be seeing him as a friend. It was a wonderful sight, and allowed for him and Hizashi to trail behind slightly. So, how many kids do you have? No judgment, just curious. If I'm only meeting them one at a time... Hizashi kept his voice low, as to not let the kids overhear. Hitoshi's a foster kid I take care of from time to time. He got into an argument with his dad last night and came to me. Shouta explained. After the commotion of last night, the kids went to bed. He called Shagio, Hitoshi's case carrier, and explained the situation. Luckily, he answered the phone at such a late hour. Together, they decided that Hitoshi should stay with Shouta for a few days, until they got everything sorted with his dad. The morning he got the all clear from Shoji, saying his dad agreed to this arrangement, although Shouta was clear there was plenty of heated words before he actually caved in. Are you sure he's not yours? I see a strong resemblance between you two. Hizashi teased. It's called stressed, and possibly insomnia. I don't think that's a family trait. Shouta smirked, and Hizashi looked concerned. I know you put all your efforts into taking care of others, but who's taking care of you? Shouta stopped walking for a moment. It was sure that he hadn't prioritized himself in years, long before Eri came around. Between giving his all at work, taking care of foster kids, and eventually adopting Eri, Shouta realized he hadn't thought about his own personal needs in years. He was always under the impression that if he worked hard, everything in his life would just fall into place. But it felt like, over the years, it was getting more and more chaotic. Not that he would complain about bringing Eri into his life, or even Hitoshi, but at some point, he needed to worry about himself before there was nothing left for him to give to others. Don't worry about me, Hizashi. I'm fine. He gave a half-hearted smile and hoped it would be dropped. If you start taking care of yourself, then I won't worry. But until then... Hizashi returned the smile, but it was much more genuine. Do I have to bring you lunch or something every day to make sure you're eating? I'm not that helpless. Shouta chuckled and continued to walk, Hizashi falling into step behind him. They entered the big cat exhibit just a few moments after Eri and Hitoshi. The pair of them were curiously looking into the lion's enclosure, which had a few perch of various locations sleeping. A lioness was on the prowl towards one of the side of the enclosure, but the rest were sleeping in the sun, probably basking in as much light as they could. If you say so, Hizashi shrugged. But I think you're like a cat. Sure, you can take care of yourself, but someone better comes in and helps you get your claws tangled into a couch. Shouta was offended, using his own favorite animal against him. The nerve. I guess that would make you a cockatiel. Intelligent, excitable, and really loud. Hizashi gawked at him like Shouta just struck him across the face or something. Here I thought you were always so serious. You really think I'm intelligent? Hizashi teased, probably not expecting Shouta to have a real response. Of course you are. I've seen the way you put your work into your lessons. You would have to be intelligent to be such a great teacher. Now it was Hisashi's turn to look serious. The smile fell from his face, but not in the way that made him look upset. Instead, it was more of disbelief, like no one had ever told him that before. Thanks. For once his voice was on the quieter side, barely above a whisper, and he could have easily lost to the crowd surrounding them. Shouta wanted to reach out and lace his fingers into Hisashi's, but he knew that he shouldn't. Instead, they just watched as Eri pressed her face into the glass, trying to see as much of the enclosure as possible, while Hitoshi laughed at her. They followed Eri the rest of the day, being led from one section of the zoo to another with mandatory snack breaks whenever they passed a stall that looked like it had something particularly good. Hisashi insisted on buying whatever snacks Eri wanted, since Shouta bought the tickets. It was a kind and unnecessary gesture. At the end of it all, they decided to exchange numbers, just in case they needed to get a hold of each other for whatever reason. On the train ride back, Eri curled up on his chest, sleeping. Shouta sent him a text, thanking for joining them. When the reply came back far too quickly, Shouta just smiled. Text from your boyfriend. Hitoshi smirked. We're not dating. Shouta slipped his phone into his pocket, careful not to disturb the sleeping Eri. Whatever you want to tell yourself, but I have eyes. I can see what's going on. Shouta sighed. Damn, this kid was too smart. We are waiting until the school year ends. I can't do that to Eri. She needs to have something normal in her life, and dating her teacher is not normal. Yeah, but I'm starting to think normal is overrated. Hitoshi leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. None of us are normal, but we have each other, right? Shouta looped his arm around the teen and let him rest against his side. Of course we do. The rest of the ride was silent, as Shouta let both kids get some much-needed rest. He muddled over Hitoshi's words. Maybe being normal was overrated. Yeah, being Nobra's overrated. Also, I kind of forgot that Hitoshi was in this fanfic. Now it makes sense why, background Hitoshi and Denki would appear. I was like, how the fuck is that gonna work? Like, how the fuck is that gonna get integrated? I don't understand, but I understand now. And you know what? I love the idea of Shouta fostering Hitoshi at one point. I hope Shouta adopts Hitoshi. That would be nice. Or, better yet, Hisashi adopts Hitoshi, and then Hisashi and Shouta marry. Therefore, they become a family. That would be an interesting fanfiction. Where Hisashi has Eri. Or maybe Hisashi has Hitoshi. Or, no, actually, I feel like it would be better with Eri. Since it would be like, oh yeah, they're counterparts. Like, Eri, kind of like me, sunshine, rainbows, kind of, has a little dark secret. Coffee lover, cat lover, insomniac. Oh my god, they're like copy-paste, except one has sarcasm. The other is not sarcastic. There's a deeper distinguish between the two, but if we're going on a superficial level, their only difference is the fact that one is sassy and the other is not, right? But if we want to go deeper into what they tick, yes, they're different characters with similar personality traits. But that's if we're getting into the logistics of shit. But we're not getting into the logistics of shit because I don't think you guys want to sit here and listen to me rant for 2 hours about the logistics of Shouta Aizawa and Hitoshi Shinso. Unless you do, which I highly doubt. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.